Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. Today I want to talk to you about some big news on the Optimus front that actually kind of snuck by me. And fortunately, one of my ex-friends, PJ Weddle, actually alerted this to me, so I wanted to actually talk about this today. Elon Musk bets big on Optimus with a $685 million China deal. So we're going to read over the actual article here. You can see from the Tesla archive the sort of main points here. The article itself is very, very China-centric, and it's clearly translated from Chinese into English. It's kind of a little bit bizarre, and there are some serious mistakes with the article, so it calls into question whether everything is correct about it, but I think the main points are valid, so it's definitely worth going over as an insight into Optimus version 3, how it's developing, and how close it is to really starting to scale up into mass production of thousands of units. But first I want to talk about Grok a little bit, and I'm going to come back to Grok at the end of this video because it actually tails into Optimus quite a bit here. Anyway, on Friday, Elon Musk said the X recommendation system is evolving very rapidly. We are aiming for deletion of all heuristics within 4 to 6 weeks. Grok will literally read every post and watch every video, 100 million plus per day, to match users with content they're most likely to find interesting. This should address the new user or small account problem where you post something great but nobody sees it. We will also be adding the ability for you to adjust your feed temporarily or permanently just by asking Grok. So in other words, your preferences are going to become a conversation with Grok. The amount of inference that this implies, the fact that Grok is going to be reading all of our posts, and some of them are just stupid as hell, we'll just say like, hey, I got up this morning and I had some coffee or something like that. It's going to read that post, right? But it's also going to watch videos, which means it's also got to be doing multimodal inference and watching videos and understanding them. Even just the transcripts and stuff of that is just an immense amount of inference, and where they're going to get this power, I just don't know. But however they're going to do it, it's very, very impressive. Heuristics, of course, are human ideas of how to code. Like, if this post has the word space in it, then John might be interested, so send him that thing, right? So something like that. That's heuristics, but you can only apply so many of those. You could have millions of heuristics and still have posts that are really interesting to me get lost that I never would see because they just don't cover everything. Whereas hopefully a neural network, a large neural network like Grok and potentially Grok 5 that I'm going to continue on with in just a second, will be able to read this and actually have an understanding of what I personally might like and feed me that. Now, does that have the danger of siloing everything so that we only see the information that we're interested in? Yes. So I hope that X and XAI will consider that, and of course always feed us interesting stuff that doesn't necessarily exactly align with what we have, or else we're all just going to live in information silos, which would be very boring and also probably move us away from the ability to talk to each other very well because we just won't have a shared sense of truth. And speaking of Grok and intelligence, here's a little tidbit. Elon has been talking about this for a while, but he said on Saturday, my estimate of the probability of Grok 5 achieving AGI is now at 10% and rising. You notice I said if you want to talk about that with somebody, I'm happy to volunteer for the job because I would like to know what his definition of AGI is. We know what Sam Altman's is, we know what Grok's is, but we don't know exactly what Elon's definition is, so it'd be really interesting to know about that. But AGI, by most definitions, would place Grok at the realm of the most intelligent humans, right? That's somewhere on the order of what it would be. Now, the way that large language models and large multimodal models work is not exactly analogous to humans, so it might be very, very smart in some senses and a little dumber in others, but within that sort of playroom, I guess that's where AGI is. But 1 in 10 odds, that's not bad. That's something pretty amazing. And like I said, we're going to get back to that in just a second. But first, let's talk about this article that came out on the 15th of October. Elon Musk throws a $685 million order to Sanhua, and China becomes an important supplier for Optimus. So again, this is very, very China-centric. You'll be able to see it's like China this, China rah-rah, China all that kind of stuff, which is fine. But just notice that that's the angle that it's taking. But more importantly, there are some things that are definitely not right with this article. They're incorrect facts, so we'll have to take the account of that as well. As far as Sanhua is concerned, it's a company that Tesla has worked with for quite a while. I believe that they make at least parts for Tesla's heat pump, if not the entire heat pump itself. And so they develop precision refrigeration units and things like that, but also actuators, and particularly linear actuators. And so $685 million specifically to build linear actuators, as far as I can tell from this article, means that Tesla is doubling down on not using completely rotational actuators, which is something Scott Walter and I have talked about at length. If you're interested, I'll leave a couple of links at the end of this video. But anyway, it likely means Optimus version 3 will have rotational actuators, obviously, but also some linear actuators still. So I've highlighted a few things here, so we'll go through this quickly. On October 15th, the news that Tesla had placed a $685 million actuator order with Chinese supplier Sanhua Intelligent Control ignited their A shares, and they actually had to stop sales of the stock in China because it had actually maxed out as much as it was allowed to go in one day. So anyway, good deal for a lot of people who made a lot of money that day, obviously, as it just topped out. Anyway, continuing from the test assembly line at the Fremont factory, which I'm not positive that we know about. As far as I knew, that they were working primarily in Palo Alto, which is not that far away from Fremont, but this would be news to me. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but if it is, there are Optimi that are either working or being built in Fremont or both. I'm not exactly sure. Anyway, to locking in the core supply chain, the commercialization process of Optimus has entered the countdown. That is probably true. We're looking at probably early 26 before we start to see the V3 version of Optimus begin to roll out in earnest. And here we get some of that Chinese rah-rah stuff. The Chinese supply chain is becoming a key fulcrum for Musk's ambition. Now, obviously, the Chinese supply chain is important to everybody. They've got the lock on rare earth minerals, if nothing else, so they get to build all the magnets and the actuators and stuff. So they are the fulcrum for many people's industrial plans, and in particular robotics plans. And then continuing on, Musk has never concealed his ambition for Optimus. At the Q3 2025 earnings conference, he first disclosed the progress of small-scale test assembly and clarified the delivery target of 2026. So early 2026, maybe we'll slip into second quarter of 2026, but we should see some V3 Optimi by the end of the year, I would imagine, or maybe very early January. But this article is not about seeing a few prototypes, it's about the beginnings of mass production. The huge order from Sanhua Intelligent Control further verifies the maturity of the supply chain as the joints of the robot, the precision and cost of linear actuators, so that's very specific, not rotary actuators, but linear actuators, directly determine the feasibility of mass production. And this, of course, is very true. If it's artisanal, if it takes forever to build an actuator and it costs a lot of money, you can't really mass produce it. And then continuing on with something that Elon had talked about, if the unit price of Optimus is controlled to within $20,000, I think that's a weird translation, but I think it means under $20,000. The global market scale will exceed 1 million units. I think that is a huge underestimate. I think it will be much, much bigger than 1 million units, but maybe they're talking about within the next couple of years. And some more interesting facts, again, I can't verify these facts. The joint flexibility of the second generation Optimus has increased by 40% and energy consumption has decreased by 25%. That 25% decrease in energy consumption would be a huge thing because it's better for the batteries. It also reduces the amount of heat being produced. So that would be amazing. And that's second generation. So we can assume the third generation will have an advance over that second generation, if indeed this translation is accurate and they're not talking about future releases of Optimus Generation 3. And continuing on, it gets into the labor shortage, the growing labor shortage, the aging labor force, the inability to replace laborers, and Tesla and many other players, including Figure and Aptronic, etc., their prediction that this market is going to need a lot of humanoid robots in the near future within the next 5 to 10 years. And then we get to another prediction that I think is extremely, extremely low. According to the prediction of the International Federation of Robotics, or IFR, by 2030, the global industrial robot market scale will reach 10 million units, and the proportion of humanoid robots is expected to exceed 15%. So if I'm reading that correctly, that means 1.5 million humanoid robots in 2030. I think that is extremely low. I think we're probably looking at 10 times that much, or about 15 million humanoid robots per year by 2030, maybe 2031. But I think once these things get good enough to do useful work, which is probably going to happen by 2027 or 2028, the demand for them is going to be almost infinite. So growing the supply chain will take some time. And so they're not going to be able to produce tens of millions right away. But by the early 2030s, 10 to 15 million a year, I think is probably on target here. And then we get into some other potential Tesla suppliers. The linear actuator order from Sanhua Intelligent Control is just the tip of the iceberg. Optimus needs to be equipped with 28 to 40 joint modules, I assume that means actuators, involving key components such as harmonic reducers and servo motors. Chinese manufacturers have occupied 70% of Tesla's supply chain share thanks to their cost advantages and rapid technological innovation. And of course, the cost advantage and rapid technological innovation are both partially due to the fact that China again controls the entire rare earth process, from digging it out of the ground to refining it especially. And so China has a major advantage in that realm. But whatever the case, Tesla and everybody else clearly depends on Chinese manufacturers. And interestingly enough, Green Harmonic, the leading domestic harmonic reducer enterprise, is also accelerating its capacity. They're expected to have an annual production capacity of 500,000 units, which is sufficient to meet the initial mass production demands of Optimus. That's interesting because we could be looking at 40 to 50 of these, just call it 50 for a nice even round number, per robot. 40 to 50 of these harmonic reducers, which if you divide that into 500,000 is 10,000. So that's only enough for 10,000 Optimi. Now, again, that's 2026, 2027, so that may very well be enough, but they're going to have to expand quite a bit from there to supply millions of Optimi, plus, of course, other humanoid robotics companies that will also want these products. And then we get into some factually wrong things. Tesla's self-developed Dojo supercomputer, which has been killed at this point, and NVIDIA GPUs form the computing power base. Not really true anymore. While the visual perception solutions of Chinese enterprises, such as Cambricon and Horizon, are accelerating the replacement of overseas suppliers. Again, I don't think that is very true. Tesla has been very much in-house with their vision system. Quote, the requirements of robots for low power consumption and high computing power highly overlap with those of autonomous driving chips. Very, very true. An industry analyst pointed out, but that doesn't mean that Tesla is out looking for somebody else because they've been developing this stuff themselves. And then we get to specifically the AI system of Optimus needs to handle three major types of tasks, and this is true. Environmental perception, in other words, vision, motion control, and decision making and planning, so the slower, more reasoning type of activity that needs to go on. In terms of environmental perception, Tesla uses a multi-sensor fusion solution. They do not, including high-precision cameras. Yes, they do. They do not use millimeter wave radars or LiDARs. I don't know where the hell they got this information, but they absolutely do not. So this is just factually incorrect, and it calls into question the accuracy of this entire article, which makes me a little bit worried about all of the facts. So again, take all of this with a grain of salt until we get confirmation from other sources. And again, continuing on, currently Tesla mainly uses its self-developed D1 chips in combination with NVIDIA's Orin chips to form a computing platform. No, they don't use their D1 chips anymore. However, considering cost factors, more Chinese suppliers may be introduced in the future. Again, very, very unlikely. Tesla likes what they've got in terms of their compute, and of course they have AI 4 out in cars already, and AI 5 will be rolling out relatively soon, and then there will be AI 6 as well. So Tesla's got its own internal roadmap. Now, as for the next paragraph, this is very much correct. At the algorithm level, Tesla's accumulation in autonomous driving technology provides important support for its robot project. Optimus uses a neural network architecture homologous to autopilot, nice word, enabling rapid environmental learning and behavior prediction. This technology transfer not only shortens the development cycle, but also reduces R&D costs. Very, very true. And then, of course, we get to the manufacturing process of robots themselves may be completed by another batch of robots. And once this self-circulating model is successful, the production cost will decrease exponentially, and of course, the speed of production will go up exponentially as well. So that is very, very true. So that's the bulk of the article. Again, there are factual errors in there, so I hope to see some confirmation from other sources about some of the other information, but it looks like it's good in terms of the amount of money that Tesla is putting in to do the pre-order and all, and obviously Chinese suppliers are going to be extremely important to Optimus and to Figure and to all of the other robotics companies, no matter where they're based in the world. But let's go back to this environmental perception, motion control, and decision-making and planning part of things. This is what Optimus needs to do. So the perception is seeing things. The motion control is just basic control, pick up a glass of water, walk, do things like that. And then the decision-making and planning part is where Grok comes in. So I'm going to circle back to the beginning here. And if we go back to this, the probability of Grok 5 achieving AGI now is at 10% and rising, and we should see Grok 5 by the end of this year, and we should see Optimus version 3 or Gen 3 out by the end of this year, early January, in early prototype production. And the vision system and the ability to walk and move around and things like that are all going to be controlled on device, but the reasoning capability of Optimus is obviously not going to be on device. The edge devices do not have enough power to do that, so what we're going to have is Grok plugged into Optimus to be able to interpret what the user wants, to be able to interpret what they're seeing, to look around and see things. And thus, the smarter Grok is, the smarter Optimus is going to be on these long horizon reasoning tasks. And the fact that we're going to have Grok reading all of our X posts, watching all of these videos, and potentially being as smart as the smartest humans and gathering all of this data means that we could have an incredibly smart companion. And beyond the ability for Tesla to mass manufacture things, right? They have the ability to manufacture a lot of cars, which means they're going to have a big advantage if they can get Optimus working properly, if they can get the version 3 really set into something that works properly and is mass manufacturable. They're going to have a huge advantage to be able to manufacture many of them that other companies just are not going to have because they don't have that kind of experience. And if you layer on top of that the fact that they could have AGI in-house that you can actually plug into this robot that will then make it as smart as about the smartest human that that you know, potentially even smarter than that, and able to work 24 hours a day unless it's charging or something, that will allow this robot to be incredibly valuable in the future. And that's something all of us can get excited about. This could really unlock a future that is radically different than today. Alrighty, folks, that's what I've got for you today. Let me know in the comments what you think about all of this. Am I too optimistic or not optimistic enough? Let me know. While you're down there, if you don't mind liking the video, it really helps out. And of course, consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. And I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.